Do a roll call. Councillor Salvador,
Good afternoon.
Councillor Hamilton,
Good afternoon.
Councillor Jans,
Good afternoon.
Councillor Wright,
Good afternoon.
and see if other colleagues are joining us. Councillor Principe,
Hello.
okay. So we dealt with the 7-1. Now we are on to 7-2, annual delegation of authority. And I'll go to administration if they have any opening remarks or presentation.
Good morning. Sorry, good afternoon.
It's fine.
In compliance with City Administration Bylaw 16620, which requires the city manager to report on procurement agreements over $250,000 arising from non-competitive procurement processes, this report provides the details on all such agreements for 2023. It also, as well as providing information on competitive procurements. In addition, this report provides an update on the City of Edmonton's sustainable procurement policy implementation. With me today is Sarab Sarabi, Branch Manager of Corporate Procurement and Supply Services, as well as Jennifer Smid, the City's Director of Procurement. Also joining the delegation is Tori Williamson, Chief Operating Officer of Buy Social Canada. Following the presentation, we'd be happy to answer any questions you may have. I'll now pass it to Sarab.
Thank you, Stacy. Good afternoon, everybody. So we'll start with our first stop overview of the terminology. There are multiple ways that the city procures construction goods and services. The procurement process can differ depending on the dollar value, risk level, the type of purchase, or any other special requirements. The procurement processes and procedures of the City of Edmonton adhere to the highest standards of efficiency and compliance. We strive to ensure that all city procurements are carried out innovatively and efficiently while fully complying with all applicable rules, regulations, and trade agreements. We maintain regular communication with many other peer organizations to share our approaches and solutions and consider the use of best practices in our work. The most common and preferred way to acquire goods and services for the city is by competitive procurement processes. All suppliers have an equal chance to bid for an opportunity, as a notification is posted on the provincial government's procurement website, Alberta Purchasing Connection, and the sourcing event is also posted on Ariba Business Network Discovery, the city procurement software application. All compliant bids are reviewed by a formal evaluation committee using a consistent and predetermined evaluation process. The competitive process will typically lead to one of the three types of situation: standing arrangements, pre-qualified list, or typical contracts. Non-competitive procurement options are used only in situations when there is a limited number of competitors, a limited amount of time available to fulfill a need, or other specific requirements that can only be met by one particular organization. This option is used under the requirements of applicable trade agreements and follows Canadian procurement standards. Administration reports non-competitive procurement agreements with values exceeding $250,000 to the Executive Committee annually. For non-competitive agreements, there may be trade agreement exceptions that enable the city to forego the use of competitive procurement processes and instead seek competitive quotations or negotiate directly with one or a small number of suppliers. For non-competitive agreements, the city ensures value for money by using limited competition, means seeking more than one quotation if possible, or by negotiating the best possible pricing and terms of agreement. Attachment 1 provides a summary of competitive and non-competitive agreements greater than $250,000 in January 1st, 2023 to December 31st, 2023 reporting period. Attachment 2 provides details on individual non-competitive procurements by department. This slide shows a summary of number of competitive versus non-competitive procurements that are over $250,000. From a total of 290 contracts, 87% of contracts were competitive, representing 253 contracts. 30% of the contracts were non-competitive, representing 37 contracts. On the next slide, well, in the previous one, we showed that 70% of contracts by number were procured competitively. When looking at the value of the procurements, the percentage increases further. So from total of 290 contracts, 95% of contracts, or 2.29 billion, were done competitively, and 5%, or 111 million, were done non-competitively. Local procurement. Now I'll go through some statistics that show how many of our procurements are awarded to local businesses. I want to note here that as a public sector organization, the city must adhere to trade agreements that require a fair, open, and competitive procurement process for any goods and services valued over $75,000, for services and construction services valued above $200,000. Trade agreements prevent preferential treatment to local suppliers, and the city must ensure that suppliers are not discriminated against based on their location. Excuse me. Local procurement for the purpose of this report is defined as any supplier with a business address containing a postal code in the capital region. These figures are based a total of 289 contracts awarded in 2023. 72% of the competitive contracts were awarded to local firms. This represents an increase from 63% in 2022, 69% in 2021, and 67% in 2020. 47% of non-competitive contracts were awarded to local firms. This is on growth with 48% in 2021, 42% in 2020, 48% in 2022, 42% in 2021, and 39% in 2020. The reason non-competitive procurements use non-local suppliers more often than competitive procurements is due to procuring requirements that have a specific needs or distribution change that may not be able to be met with local suppliers. Not noted on the slide, the data on the slide, but the city purchasers are encouraged to seek quotes from local businesses for purchasing under $75,000, as this is exempt from trade agreement requirements. This will increase opportunities for local suppliers in ways that remain compliant with interprovincial and international trade agreements. This slide focuses on the value of the procurements awarded to local businesses. As you can see, for competitive procurements, the percentage drops slightly from the previous slide of 72% to 67%. The 67% shown on this slide represents 1.5 billion of a total of $2.2 billion of contracts. For non-competitive procurements, the percentage increases significantly from the previous slide of 47% to 75%. This shows that a majority of non-competitive dollars are staying in Edmonton area. Now I'll walk you through our sustainable procurement program and provide an update on progress achieved in 2023 and work that is ongoing in 2024. As background, sustainable procurement policy was initially approved by Council in 2009, updated in 2019, and amended in 2022 to add Indigenous procurement as a guiding principle. The intent is to leverage the city procurement processes to produce social and environment benefits to the community. The expected outcomes for the social value and Indigenous pillars include enhancing social, cultural, economic opportunities for our community. The expected outcomes for the environmental pillars include emission management, energy efficiency, waste reduction, water reduction, and pollution reduction. The expected outcomes for the ethical pillar include ensuring safe and healthy workplaces for the people who make and supply goods and provide construction, intellectual property rights, and service for the city. The code ensures the city maintains its integrity as a public institution by contracting only with suppliers who support ethical business practices. The city made significant progress in 2023 in advancing the Sustainable Procurement Program. The overall program is governed by the overarching policy and 4 guiding principles: indigenous procurement, social value consideration, environmental sustainability, and ethical standard. As you can see on this slide, there are a number of frameworks that give a structure to how the policy will be implemented, some of which overlap more than one guiding principle. The Social Procurement Framework and Indigenous Procurement Framework guides the procurement processes to achieve the desired program outcomes. The Community Benefit Agreement Framework will enforce a specific social value outcomes such as hiring, training, or procurement on construction, infrastructure, and developmental projects to ensure projects enhance social, cultural, environmental, and economic opportunities for the community. The Diversity Spend Reporting Framework will identify how the city will track diversity of city suppliers against social value consideration outcomes of the city's sustainable procurement policy. It will describe the current efforts underway to support diversity spend at the city, as well as recommendations for future activities to support and increase diversity spend. The Measurement and Reporting Framework will use an outcome-based measurements and reporting process. An indigenous set-aside approach is also being developed with the goal of increasing direct and subcontracting spend with indigenous businesses. Along with the framework, a number of tools have or will be implemented that operationalize aspects of the program. The Sustainable Low-Value Purchasing Guideline was introduced in July 2023. The guideline provides instruction to city staff on when and how to include social, indigenous, and sustainable considerations for low-value procurement decisions. It includes when and how to source low-value procurements directly from social enterprises, indigenous businesses, and diverse-owned businesses. A key feature of this guideline is that it includes a variety of third-party diverse company directories to which low-value procurements can be directed. Administration has also developed a menu of sustainable procurement evaluated criteria and contractual requirements, which was introduced in August 2023. Contractual requirements include hiring indigenous or equity-deserving employees, hiring apprentices, purchasing from indigenous businesses, diverse-owned businesses, or social enterprises, and environmental considerations. A number of supports are in place to help to communicate, educate, activate, and engage with city staff and stakeholders. We have an implementation plan and are regularly communicating and promoting the program to internal staff, external stakeholders, and individual businesses. In June, we are partnering with business communities to host a social procurement networking event called Purchase with Purpose. Opportunities for indigenous, diverse, and social businesses to sell to the public sector. The half-day event is for current and potential social value suppliers to meet and connect with the city and other public purchases in the area. Other major suppliers who are looking to subcontract work to social value suppliers will also be invited to come to the event to make connections and build relationships. And lastly, we are convening a Sustainable Procurement Advisory Committee. The committee will advise administration on the implementation, improvements, and outcome of the City of Edmonton Sustainable Procurement Policy. This committee will be comprised of both internal and external stakeholders that can speak on behalf of industries and community groups that will be affected by the City of Edmonton Sustainable Procurement Policy. Now, I have shared where we are at with the implementation of Sustainable Procurement Policy. I would like to share a few statistics that show our progress, as well as I'll ask our consultant from Bisocial Canada to share their thoughts on the city's progress. In August 2023, new and enhanced criteria was released through the development of a new social procurement menu. This new menu replaced with what we had in use since 2020. The new menu includes a commodity guide that advises on when to apply sustainable criteria, and includes additional social and indigenous focus criteria that wasn't previously available. It also provides contract requirements that can be incorporated into contracts. As you can see, between 2021 and 2022, there was a large increase in the use of sustainable criteria. We have seen a smaller jump between 2022 and 2023, which isn't surprising since the new menu was enrolled in later part of this year. But the number is still increasing, which is positive. We are adopting some internal measures and will do more training and educational sessions that we can expect will facilitate inclusion of sustainable criteria and contract requirements in even more procurements. This slide highlights the comprehensive outreach and engagement efforts made by the city in 2023 to promote our sustainable procurement initiative. The sustainable procurement team has invested approximately 125 hours in external outreach. Activities included presentations, meetings with industry and business associations, as well as participation in conferences, seminars, and roundtable discussions. Roughly 75 hours has been spent on internal sessions to educate and increase engagement from our own staff. The focus on this was to ensure all departments understood and integrate sustainable practices in their procurement. And another 60 hours were spent preparing and delivering selling to the city sessions. These sessions aim to prepare external vendors to understand how they can engage with the city's procurement processes. These efforts are enhancing awareness and understandings of the city's sustainable procurement policies, both internally and across various community organizations. It is clear that it has demonstrated growth in engagement and use of sustainable procurement tools and practices. The next slide will determine the support provided by Social Canada in implementing the City of Edmonton's sustainable procurement policy. The key contributions of By Social Canada are as follows: assisted in creating frameworks, tools, and procedures tailored to our needs, led efforts in engaging both internal purchases and internal city branches, provides support in establishing a sustainable procurement advisory committee that will begin meeting in this spring. By Social Canada's decades of experience with municipalities like Vancouver and Calgary showcases their expertise. We have been in a strategic partnership with By Social Canada since 2019, which has significantly aided in advancement of our sustainable procurement strategies. I'm delighted to invite Tori Williamson, Chief Operating Officer of By Social Canada. Tori will share insight into the progress and impact of sustainable procurement efforts.
Thank you, Saurabh, and hello, Mayor and Councillors. My name is Tori Williamson, and I am the Chief Operating Officer at By Social Canada. And By Social Canada isn't just a typical consulting organization. We are a social enterprise, and we believe that procurement is more than an economic transaction. It contributes to community, social, and economic goals. We see opportunities to buy and sell with impact at all levels in the marketplace, and through social procurement advocacy, education, and consulting, we are working with stakeholders and colleagues like the City of Edmonton to create a social value marketplace that will help to unleash the transformative power of the market. So through our work, we engage with all levels of government. We work with corporations, we work with nonprofits and institutions, all with the goal to help develop social procurement policies and programs. The policies and programs themselves are not the end goal, though. The end goal is that we're shifting our economic activity to better support our communities, people, and the planet. So social procurement is really a tool to help the City of Edmonton contribute to your social, environmental, and economic goals for your community. As Saurabh explained, we've been working with the City of Edmonton since 2019 and have seen the journey that the city has been on to explore sustainable procurement. This current work has been focused on going further with implementation. So we are working on that extensive framework, set of frameworks within the Sustainable Procurement Program, as well as tools to help leverage the city's spend to better serve the Edmonton community. And there's a lot in the Edmonton community that can use the support of city's procurement. There are many social enterprises in Edmonton, like Boyle Street. Embers has recently opened in Edmonton and has 800 people looking for work. Redemptive Developments, Neo and Spice working on solar power investment and implementation opportunities, all have the opportunity to engage in public procurement and then to create further impact through supportive employment and environmental impacts. So procurement and putting in social value considerations into bids plays a key role, but we also recognize that the ecosystem needs convening and support to augment procurement so that social enterprises, local businesses, diverse businesses, Indigenous businesses can have the support needed in order to engage in public procurement. And so we recognize the wraparound and ecosystem approach that the city is taking to create that supportive ecosystem. Within the supplier side of the construction sector, we also see a lot of engagement within the Edmonton community, as Bisocial Canada is connected with Delnor, Clark Builders, Chandos Construction, and Bird, who are recognizing that when they respond to City of Edmonton procurement opportunities that are asking for social procurement, they need to look at their own supply chains and practices to serve the city's demand for social value. So when we consider how this fits into a national context of social procurement, that Bisocial Canada has some great resources online if you'd like to learn more, but to summarize it, we're seeing lots of municipalities exploring social and sustainable procurement at different stages. I'm located near Vancouver, and Vancouver was an early adopter of sustainable procurement, but now we're advocating them to go further and to renew their program like the City of Edmonton is doing. We've seen the City of Calgary continue to refine and develop their processes for the questionnaire, which Bisocial Canada supported the initial development of. The City of Toronto has been focused on diverse suppliers and community benefits in construction projects. And the federal government has their Indigenous procurement strategy for Indigenous businesses, as well as been focusing on diverse suppliers. I would say that none of these organizations are working on a program as broad and with as much depth as the City of Edmonton is currently working on. And so because of that, Bisocial Canada will be recognizing the City of Edmonton with our annual Social Procurement Champion Awards coming up in a few weeks. We're having an event. Everyone's welcome to join. It's free and online. And the reason we're recognizing the City of Edmonton is because you are looking at this in a very holistic way. What are all of the different opportunities within your supply chain for you to start to seek sustainable procurement benefits and outcomes? So you're taking advantage of regulatory opportunities like Indigenous set-asides. You're helping to support the growing practice of community benefits. There are specific projects that are implementing community benefits already, like the light rail transit projects, as well as looking at how can that be expanded across more projects through the community benefits framework. You're looking at really focusing on going further than just supplier activities by looking at what are specific contract outcomes that we can seek on our purchasing. So how can you look at one contract and see what has been done for Indigenous employment on this contract? How many hours have been contributed to? Maybe there was a new hiring created. You could look at how many local businesses or social enterprises were subcontractors on a contract. What was the dollar value of that spend? So really looking at so many different dimensions, but along these dimensions, incorporating communication and engagement with community, stakeholders, business community, social enterprises, and others. And I think that's really key for this holistic, impressive program to be successful. So thank you for having me here to speak today, and I look forward to hearing more of the presentation. I think I'm passing it off to somebody else, or I'm concluding.
Yeah, I take it from here. Thanks, Tori. Thanks to you and Bisocial for your comments. In terms of next step, this slide shows where our team focus will be for 2024. We will be connecting with our Sustainable Procurement Advisory Committee, proposed member in near future, and holding the first meeting in spring. Our diversity spend reporting framework is at the final draft stage, so we'll be enrolled in the next few months. Our networking event is scheduled for June, and we are looking forward to connecting directly with diverse and Indigenous businesses and spreading the work that City is doing in this space with everybody. We will continue to work on our Indigenous set-aside approach with a plan to bring it to the Indigenous business communities media. Having said that, the work under this program has already started by us working directly with a few Indigenous businesses trying to explore collaboration opportunities and where we can find appropriate work to support Indigenous businesses within the set-aside program. We expect our community benefit framework to be finalized in the fall, at which time we will look ahead to see what projects it can be implemented on in the coming years. And the measurement and reporting framework is ready, and it's at final stages of review, and it will be also enrolled in fall. All of the framework, tools, and approaches and supports will evolve over time. As we review the success of work that has been implemented, we will adopt and adjust to ensure the program is meeting the desired outcomes. While the policy has been in effect for some years now, it takes time to see tangible positive outcome materializes. We are already seeing a strong uptake on the use of our menu, our internal staff, industry, businesses, and community-focused organizations are excited to see our work progress, and they are coming to the table with commitment and engagement into the work we are doing. We believe this work is on track and will continue to progress and grow as we move ahead with different aspects of the program. This concludes our presentation, and we would be happy to answer any questions.
Well, first of all, thank you so much for the presentation, and thank you so much for all the good work that you have been doing. One of the reasons I selected was for you to provide you the opportunity to highlight all the work and also show our appreciation on the progress being made. So thank you so much for that. Now that I will open for questions from colleagues. Councillor Hamilton.
Thank you. So thank you for that presentation. I think it outlines how in the city procurement is so broad and so far-reaching. I wanted to pick up on something that the representative from Bisocial brought up, and maybe you can expand on this a little bit more. You had indicated that you're trying to work with some of your partners in procurement, bidders, let's say, and you mentioned some construction companies to understand the downflow of procurement or social procurement opportunities within their own supply chains. Could you speak to that a little bit more, please?
Hi. Yes, absolutely. So when the city asks for something related to social and sustainable value, the suppliers are the ones who are providing that. So either in how they are structured, if they are diverse owned or incorporated as social enterprises, how they conduct their business activities through their employment activities, through training programs, and also through their own supply chains. So who they then buy materials and subcontracting from. So you have a follow-up, go ahead.
Well, yeah. My follow-up is there a municipality or is there someone who does that really well in Canada? I appreciate the accolades that you've been giving us at the City of Edmonton today, but is there another municipality that, when you talk about that kind of looking at supply chain, you think that they're doing an A+ job?
It's a process, I would say. Right? Like, this is a journey that is emerging. I think there are some really great project examples to share, but I would say that there isn't, I can't come to mind an organization who's done a checkbox and is just like doing this amazing. I have a bias towards social enterprise, so maybe if we can find a municipality who has like 20% spend with social enterprise, I'd be a big fan. But I think we can see successful practices in how projects are implemented. So really good, clear processes include engaging directly with suppliers on shaping what should be within a program. So looking at a project rather. So if you're looking to build a bridge, reaching out to the supplier and working with them collaboratively, like on an integrated project delivery model project, where you could decide what the project specific targets are going to be, is going to allow for more flexibility and collaboration that's going to be project specific. So that's kind of one example. We've seen with the City of Vancouver Community Benefit Agreement, where they're looking at developer-owned projects, which is going to be noted as a potential inclusion within the city's program, where they have 10% targets for social procurement, local procurement, and equitable hiring. Those are consistent targets, so they're not as developed collaboratively and with flexibility across projects, but those projects require that there is a support third-party monitor who's going to help with the implementation of that. So there's not one organization that comes to mind as far as like A+, I would say.
That's helpful. And maybe I'd like to come back to that third-party monitor question, but certainly I've heard criticism of the that you can have social procurement at one level, but then when it gets into subcontractors, then you don't have that same level of accountability. It sounds like so that I maybe should have been clearer. Would something like a third-party monitor help with that kind of program? Is there do you see partnerships with like occupational health and safety ever?
Yeah, so the way that the like bidding requirement for social procurement or the community benefits inclusion should clearly indicate which level of subcontractors are incorporated. When we've developed programs in the past, we've often identified a dollar value threshold for the subcontractor contract. That means that they would be included within the reporting. So I would recommend including them because, as you've stated, there's so much value deeper down within the supply chain. As far as collaboration goes, there are local community benefits networks in many communities across Canada, as well as community economic development organizations, kind of organizations who are focused on things that in poverty. Edmonton has been focused on around social procurement. You know, how do we engage the sector on equitable employment, workforce development? So those types of organizations are often part of the collaborative process when you're implementing that type of program. And by Social Canada, we're a national organization. And so if we're working on a localized project, we'll try to find a local partner who has that relationships and knowledge of the local context to bring that into a project where you're implementing community benefits and goals.
Okay.
Great, thanks. I'm over time.
Yeah. Thank you, Councillor Hamilton. Just to follow up on that, maybe to folks, our folks here, how do we ensure that those subcontractors are following and living to the expectations, right? So
since we last time we came here and had this conversation, one of the things that was communicated to us from the council was the enforcement and ensuring how subcontractors are complying with social procurement requirements. What we did was, I would say, focusing on 3 areas. The first one was making sure our procurement requirements are clear in terms of expectation and how would the city would consider subcontracting strategies in terms of committing to the same principles that the city is committing to. So we have developed this new menu actually to encourage vendors to see what is important from the city when they are getting the contract. So the menu has I would say, a substantial list of items that we could add, and we are adding to our procurement, saying if you want to get into the contract, you must comply with these requirements. Okay. And that has targets on employment from specific groups, indigenous content, and many other aspects of the social program procurement requirements. So that's one thing we are doing up front, to put it in the procurement and evaluate it as part of the procurement process. So they put it in the proposal. The second part is that we have augmented our contractual language, making sure when we have social procurement requirements in our procurements, there are also contractual language to support their commitment to deliver what they're supposed to do when we do those procurements. And the third part is really the partnership and collaboration that we are doing with industry. We are constantly talking to our industry partners and industry associations, making sure there is an alignment and understanding our expectations. There is another aspect of it, which is the legal requirements that we have in our contracts, and everybody who is in contract with the city must comply with applicable laws and requirements, and that may not directly fall under social procurement, but is also a commitment for our contractors to making sure that everything is doing is legal and is compliance with any legal requirements, obligations in terms of their workforce and other obligations they have, which is something that we have in our contracts and we monitor to the best of our ability, but in many cases, the obligation at the end of the day is on the prime and the contractor.
Got it. I know last time we had this conversation, we heard some criticism from building trades and others. So, they're not here today, so they must see something moving in the right direction, right? So, which is good. So, how's your relationship with them? Like, I know you identified a number of stakeholders that you engage with. Do you engage with building trades and others as well?
We have, I remember meeting with them
Yeah.
a few times
Yeah.
back in the time where things came up. I believe we don't have like a frequent communication,
Maybe
but it's
something-
going to be part of our outreach when we are
Okay.
going to
Yeah.
socialize the program.
That's good. I think they're important stakeholders in a way because they directly work with contractors too, and also they're in the field, right? So they see the implementation, how is it working. On the I think it was referenced that the implementation of community benefits on the LRT project, right? Are we doing that on other similar large projects as well?
Yeah, so that's part of the community benefit program that we are developing.
Yeah.
The plan is to look at expanding that program. Like we have a new framework developed working with Bisocial, and the plan is to use that community benefit requirements not just on LRT projects but more infrastructure
So
projects.
do we have that, say, for Yellowhead expansion or Terwilliger expansion, Lewis Farm Rec Center? Like these are big projects, right? We're spending millions and millions, right, dollars. So do we have community benefits in those? Are we looking at them?
Great question. I think we have our colleagues from IAS on the call, so I don't know if Mr. Ferguson or somebody else would take that question.
Okay.
It might be better.
Sure, thanks, Saurabh. Bruce Ferguson here. I know Mayor Sohi, we do have the community benefit agreements for the LRT projects.
Yeah.
They are a requirement of the ISIP program.
Yeah.
So we do have those in place for Metro Line and for Valley Line West, and we will be putting one into place for Capital Line South as well.
Okay. Yeah, I know that I was part of those conversations when the infrastructure plan was being developed, right? And I inserted those community benefits as a requirement of funding when I was a federal minister. But some of the projects that we build do not fall under that specific program. They fall under other infrastructure plans where community benefits are not required. So just as an organization, I'm out of time, maybe I'll come back.
Yeah, well, I'll try to get you that information as well, Mayor Sohi. I can't speak to the other projects
No, I
right now.
understand. Thank you. Councillor Paquette, go ahead, please.
Oh, thank you, Mr. Mayor. So to follow up on that, I think the question I have today is, how are we ensuring social procurement practices are being followed by subcontracting companies who are hired by the primary contractors who are awarded the jobs through our procurement policy? Specifically, how are we tracking our social procurement outcomes with data that we can actually show?
Councillor Paquette, what we are focusing now, as the program is new and we have added some features to it very recently, specifically the menu, which is one of the, I would say, most complicated solution and complex solutions that is out there, is to focus on process outcomes for now, making sure we are using the process to the best of our ability, we are socializing it, and our data and our engagement shows uptake in use of the program. I would say it's going to take time for us to see those detailed numbers and tangible results, especially when it comes down to hiring subcontractors and making sure what we are asking for in our procurements are being translated into action and being considered by our prime. We are working on ways to see how we can collect those information. But again, where we are at now is focusing on the process outcomes.
Okay.
But considering
understand
the actual outcomes to be expected as part of the processes we have defined.
Yeah, so simplified, we don't have that data.
What
Or
kind
if the data exists, we don't know how to compile it yet.
Can you elaborate on what kind of data are you looking for?
Well, literally what I just asked for. How are we tracking the results? Are we how do we know if we're being successful with our subcontractors in their hiring practices? If we don't have the data, we cannot say that definitively one way or the other, right?
We have data, Councillor Paquette, on city spend, like how much of our contracts is being awarded to Indigenous businesses or diverse businesses, but it is at this point mainly focused on City of Edmonton direct purchases. You are right.
Yeah, no,
We're working on
I
it.
get that. So, but you say that that's something that we're working on, but how on earth are we going to track that? Because look, I'll be frank, building trades isn't here today because they're in travel right now. They're coming back from a conference. Otherwise, they indicated that they really wanted to be here. They'll be here at the next available opportunity. But we don't know, frankly, is that basically the truth? We don't know what the subcontractors, what their hiring practices are, or they may self-report, but we don't have data to track that.
Councillor Paquette, I'm just going to ask Ms. Smid to maybe talk about the reporting requirements.
Yeah, for the subcontractors.
So basically, when like the menu is used on a procurement, we have a new systems way of tracking what items are being used, so which criteria are being included in specific procurements. And then those would be the prime contractor is who we have the contract with, but they would be, you know, offloading some of that down to their subs to meet those requirements. And so I think there's going to be data collection required to go back to those contracts. So we'll know in the future which contracts have these elements incorporated. And so then it'll be a matter of coming back and bringing that information back through like the contract management functions that are happening through the city.
Okay, and how would we verify that if it's self-reporting?
Well, I suppose if we had concerns with the self-reporting, we could get into more auditing type elements of the contract.
Okay, well, I do have concerns, so I don't know how we go forward with that. That's something I'll have to think about. Okay, and I'll just leave it at that for now. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Paquette. Councillor Hamilton?
Yeah, I'm picking up maybe where Councillor Paquette is leaving off. You know, I have heard some pretty big concerns that have been hard to verify. But I think one of the learnings that's come out of that for me is that we don't have a lot of data in terms of how effective our social procurement is at the front lines of the people who it is meant to impact or help the most. And I understand that there's a limitation between what the city can, you know, if we have a one-to-one relationship, we have a little bit more of a lens on that than if there are subcontractors involved. So I would like to see us start to collect some of those metrics and get a better lens on the impact that our social procurement policy is having. And I'm willing to put a motion on the floor to that extent. Just drafting some wording here. What I think I would like to also understand is there's discussion of a menu, and I think we're talking about some of the things that are like the contracts that exist. What exists in our contract regime right now to allow us to stipulate that when someone comes on as a prime contractor, they and I think the delegation member from Bisocial sort of referred to this, but what is being put in the contracts that allow prime contractors to hold, or require, I should say, prime contractors to hold subcontractors and subcontractors accountable for social procurement policy?
So, Councillor Hamilton, from the contractual perspective, whatever terms we have with our contractors, it cascaded down to their subs and from subs to the subs. So that's a typical practice in contract management. So legally, contractually, they are obligated to follow the same obligations. Our opportunity to verify that is through us being able to audit and ask for supporting document. That is something that is supported by the contract, so we can look into using our option to audit contracts or get into more details of The reports we are supposed to receive from contractors, the prime on their performance, is something we can further explore and bring back to the council. I believe the way most of these programs work is we are clear about the requirements up front, which is a new practice for the city in terms of the new menu. We have contractual clauses to enforce that, but the assessment is based on them reporting back how they are complying with the requirements. And I believe that's maybe an opportunity for us to further look into that dynamics and see if there are any options to meet what we are hearing from council today to meet the requirements that we are hearing from today.
Yeah, I think that would be helpful for everybody involved. I'm also curious about what and we're talking about, I'm talking in general terms, but it's helpful to hear that sub and subcontractors are liable or are held as accountable under the prime contractor. I'm wondering if the city finds that subcontractors working under a prime contractor are not upholding their end of the bargain, so to speak, what mechanisms does the city have to seek to either put those prime contractors or subcontractors on, I'm going to say, probation in future? Or what impact does that have going forward in terms of their ability to bid?
So supplier performance program, Councillor Hamilton, is one of the avenues that we are exploring and we are working to augment, which is going to have social procurement requirements into it very soon. So the way the program works is we assess, we score the performance, but it takes time for a contractor or a supplier to build enough history and data with the city that we could be able to consider the results next time we are doing a procurement. So that program is launched, but to get to that full supplier performance program, it takes time. And also from the contractual legal perspective, if we have time, I can ask my colleague, Sarah Hughes from Legal Services, to maybe speak to the legal aspects of the contracts as well, if that helps.
I'm out of time, so perhaps if someone else jumps on, otherwise I have to come back for a second round.
Okay.
Thank you, Councillor Hamilton. So the sustainable procurement menu that you talked about, you recently implemented that, right? So that's, I think, 2023, August 2023, right? So that if prime contractor follows the requirements within the menu, right, and require the subcontractors to follow as well, and that menu gives you the ability to collect that data? Like,
Yes.
okay, it does,
Yeah,
right?
I think that's what we are, we are looking at that full cycle.
Yeah.
Like we ask for it in the procurement.
Yeah.
We have clauses in the contracts to enforce it.
Yeah.
We are augmenting the supplier performance program to evaluate how they are performing, and then having that full cycle of
Right.
ensuring what we are trying to achieve is being
So
performed.
you're heading toward that accountability, but it's going to take some time to
That's
get trickled down to contractors and then you to collect the data. And once you have enough, then you can actually, if a subcontractor is not living to expectations, you probably have tools to blacklist them or something, right?
Well, our main relationship will still remain with the prime, but we
Yeah.
can have them to have their subs accountable for
Yes.
like basically their portion of the work.
Okay, because our contractor is a prime contractor, right? Not with subcontractors, right? Okay, got it. Can you speak a little bit more about the the indigenous set asides, right? I know. I think we are making progress in that area, right? Can you speak to that progress a bit more?
Absolutely. So
Yeah.
the set aside is going to complement the menu, where in menu we have the option to ask our prime contractors, our main contracting parties, to consider indigenous content, a specific percentage or the requirement into their contracts with their contracting party. The set aside is the opportunity for city to directly engage into negotiations and award contract to indigenous businesses. So that's like the approach, and that's where it covers basically those one-on-one interactions. What we are doing now is collaborating and working with various different indigenous businesses, depending on their capacity and what they can do, to see how we can connect their capabilities and capacities to the work that city is doing and the projects that we have. So where we are at now is basically having those one-on-one conversations. There are some indigenous businesses that they are more sophisticated, they are more advanced in their capabilities, so they might be able to do more of a construction infrastructure projects, and there are some that may be a better fit for a smaller, lower dollar value span. So we are reviewing all those options, but it's at this point more of that one-on-one interactions to connect them to the right projects, identify their capacity, and the goal is to help them to get a contract or a couple of contracts with the city directly, but to help them build the capacity and next time be in a better position to come and competitively tender for those jobs. And that's in alignment with what we are hearing from the indigenous business communities, that they want to be active, they want to come and participate in tenders, but there could be some gaps that we are trying to help them kind of bridge those gaps.
And that won't be limited to just, say, Edmonton-based indigenous businesses. Is it open to, say, Treaty 6 Confederacy or Métis Nation or in our neighboring Enoch, for example, right? So because they make inquiries on, so it'll be broader, or will be focused on, if we set aside, okay, this much work will go to indigenous businesses. Are we limiting that to Edmonton businesses, or?
It's broad.
Broad,
It's
okay.
about City of Edmonton projects, but the definition of indigenous businesses is laid out in our indigenous procurement framework.
Yeah.
And city is not going to do the verification directly, but there are ways and there are groups that has identified to do those the verification.
Got it.
So I think it would enable various indigenous businesses in greater Edmonton area to benefit from the program.
Okay, got it. Thank you so much, brother. Councillor Rice, go ahead, please.
Thank you, Mayor Sohi, and thank you for the presentation. I have a very quick question regarding this social procurement. So as we know, and our cities is really diversity. We have lots of minority community members actually doing the business. So we have that diverse multicultural business community. So for this social procurement framework, and is that cover those minority communities business to support them and to have access to those type of procurement opportunities?
Yes, Councillor Rice, there are different opportunities within the program that would support those businesses to either do business with the city directly or through the primes or the main contracting parties with the city. The low value procurement guideline that again was introduced recently has a very, I would say, detailed list of those kind of businesses that city purchasers could use when they are doing those procurements. We actually recently increased the limit of those small or low dollar value procurements to up to 75 for the goal of encouraging city buyers to actually buy more from these groups. That's one avenue, and the other avenue is still through the menu. So when we indicate what are our sustainable procurement, social procurement requirements, one of the options that is available to city purchaser is to ask for subcontracting or doing business with those businesses as part of their contracting strategy. I'm pretty sure there are more options within the program, but those are, I think, the top two ones that come to my mind.
Okay, thank you for that. And then also, do we have data to reflect, do we have the results of the data to reflect those type of concept already implemented?
We have some data about the city direct purchases from those businesses, but something to consider is so far we have asked the businesses to self-identify what minority group they belong to. So based on, like, some they may choose to disclose that information and some may not. So based on the data that has been disclosed by those businesses to us, we have some data on the city spent, and that could be provided if you would like to see that.
Okay, thank you very much. That's my question. I yield my time.
Thank you, Councillor Rice. Councillor Paquette?
Oh, thank you, Mr. Mayor. So I'll preface this question by letting you know that sort of through the grapevine, I get reports sometimes from people who say, listen, I work with so-and-so or this outfit or the other, and they're claiming Indigenous hiring practices. And I can tell you for a fact that that is not the case. They're claiming it, but it's not happening. So what mechanisms do we have in place to hold subcontractors accountable and subcontractors to our social procurement policy? This seems to be a massive gap. And it is quite concerning because it basically derails the entire concept. I mean, I brought this forward in 2018, 2019, and we're still talking about it this many years later. And we just got this new reporting system that you're talking about. It seems like this is, maybe we are not prioritizing this. So I guess the question is, how do we hold those subcontractors and subcontractors accountable in a meaningful way?
Yeah, I think I would like to ask Ms. Sarah Hughes from legal to take this one. Maybe they can speak to legality of contracts and like how we can enforce those commitments from a legal perspective.
Yes, Councillor Paquette, in our contracts, not to repeat what's already been said, but our standard contracts generally include, at least for construction projects, include the responsibility of the contractor for their subcontractors and persons that they employ. And to add to that, we do have some limited ability in some cases to require our prime contractor to replace subs. It does depend on the specific contract, but in some of our contracts, we do include an obligation of the contractor to replace their subcontractor if they are not meeting the standard that the contractor is required to meet under the contract. And the contractor is required to comply with that. In addition, we do require or we do allow the city to use holdbacks. Our contract allows the city to use holdbacks that we've kept from payments that are due to the contractors. We can use those or keep them for the failure of the contractor to meet their requirements with respect to sustainable procurement.
Okay, so I understand all this. I've read it all. The question I have, though, is how do we enforce and investigate this? Or do we? Because it seems like we don't.
So, Councillor Paquette, maybe I'm just going to step in here. So I think we've got the framework where we incorporate the things into the RFP. We have people bid. We have prime contractors. We have the elements of the contract to hold people accountable. But we also need to know, like, if people are not, if you're aware of something that is not being complied with, we need people to report that. We wouldn't necessarily always have that information. So it's important that if people are aware of issues of non-compliance, that they report them so we can investigate them.
And that's fair, but I'm just hoping that there's some sort of system we can have, anonymized data. I know that there are lots of providers that could do that out there that would do away with the necessity for that, like for waiting on someone to report. We basically can get the data already front loaded, and that way we also can't have subcontractors or subcontractors say, okay, well, I don't get this contract, I'll just dissolve, create a new numbered company. Hey, guess what? We're a totally different outfit. There are better ways to do this, and I guess that's what I'm driving at. There are ways to get that anonymized data that is factual right out of the gate that we can track. And I'm just wondering if that's something that we're even interested in doing, is tracking that information so we don't have to rely on the off chance that someone reports this.
I guess perhaps I'm a little unclear on, I mean, I hear what you're saying. I don't think that people necessarily report their non-compliance. I wish that was the case. I don't think it is. And so I'm not sure what tools I have other than reporting that would necessarily drive.
I will take this offline because I think this is a bigger conversation, an important one, and probably can't be solved right now.
Okay. Thank you,
Mr. Mayor.
Maybe I'll go to folks from Biosocial Canada if they are aware of any mechanism that other municipalities might be deploying to ensure that subcontractors were compliant to social procurement requires of their municipality, and what reporting mechanism or what tools are available to the municipality to ensure that that compliance does exist, or if it doesn't exist, then what tools are available to hold subcontractors accountable.
Thanks, Mayor Sohi. Yeah, happy to put some thoughts forward here. There's complexities around identity data in general, and that this is personal private data that no one is required to share with their employer. So if we're looking at Indigenous employment on a project, the subcontractors and the contractors will need to communicate to their employees the purpose of the data collection, how that data will be collected, stored, communicated, and that's all regulated. So as far as tools that are helpful to adhere from that, it's still going to be up to the individual's self-identifying and reporting, no matter what the tool is, that data is accurate. So there's that on the employee side. On the employer side, the risk that they're going to be submitting falsified data is definitely something that an audit process and a process for reporting any concerns of falsified data is definitely a recommendation that you have in place, so that if there is an organization that as an individual is saying is falsifying that data, that the city would have a process to review and account that. But I think as far as a streamlined, perfect process as for collecting and reporting that data in aggregate, I haven't worked with one that I've seen be able to solve that. So maybe I should connect with Councillor Paquette and learn more about the process he's referring to.
I think that'll be a good idea. I think Councillor Paquette can reach out to you as well, right? So with it, you can connect. I think he's going to follow up offline as well with administration, because this comes up quite a bit in our conversations. I think I understand the limitations that as employer our organization has, because our accountability is to the prime contractor as you go deep down to subcontractor. So obviously there's more work to be done. I think the menu that let me talk about the menu that city has created. What are your thoughts on that?
Sorry, for the menu, I was just going to add, we have seen, like, with those concerns, having that third-party monitor type of role can be helpful as far as where that data is stored, collected, and shared. And can you clarify your question about the menu?
Yeah, the city has created, here you go, where I'm going here, sustainable procurement and contractual requirements, sustainable procurement menu, which was implemented in August of 2023. It's a menu of sustainable procurement evaluation criteria and contractual requirements in the procurement management system. I know.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, that's correct. So there could be clauses around things like Indigenous employment, equity employment, subcontracting with certain types of businesses. So businesses would need to identify themselves as being a social enterprise or a diverse business, as Councillor Rice pointed out, or even a local business. And then there would also be training and apprenticeship. So I think the big concerns that I would have, or potential opportunities for risk, would be if there's large projects that require subcontractor reporting that have a clause related to equity employment, Indigenous employment, or like for the subcontracting and like the procurement of the business identity, they could lie about their employee identity, they could lie about the identity of the business, but there can be bad actors that can lie in many of these different situations. And so I think creating an environment where the city is clearly outlining the expectations and then has a space for somebody to come to if there's a concern about any activity that isn't aligned and isn't honest.
Thank you for that. Councillor Hamilton?
Thanks. I wanted to put a motion on the table because I believe that sorry, I'm flipping back and forth between notes, but what's before us now is received for information. And I've heard through Councillor Paquette's questions and some of my own that there's a desire to see a little bit more of I'll say an evaluatory metric. So I'm just delaying here, but I'll move that administration provide a report back on metrics to evaluate the city's social procurement policy within existing contracts and give an interim analysis of the efficacy of that policy on those existing contracts. So that we can maybe have a lens on how we would evaluate it and how we're doing so far. And I know that this maybe conforms to some of the work that the procurement team is already working on, but I don't want to lose the thread on it either.
Okay. So we have motion on the floor. Maybe I'll go to administration on this. Right? What your thoughts are? I think maybe to Councillor Hamilton. I think most of the concerns that we are hearing so far are on the subcontractors, right? Or when you dig. So would that get into that, or can you elaborate how would that get into that issue?
I think so. A lot of the concerns are with subcontractors. What I'm hearing from administration is that we can hold subcontractors accountable. I think that to some of the conversation that just happened, that is self-reported, and that maybe we need to have a metric in place by which we are collecting this data and that might be either, I don't know what best practice is, and I run the risk of running sort of into the weeds on it, but I don't know what the best practice is. Is it a mix of self-reporting, or is it a mix of self-reporting and observational? Like, I don't know what the best metric to evaluate it is. I would gather that just self-reporting is probably not an adequate measure of the efficacy of social procurement policy, and that we probably, knowing that administration is and the team before us is already working on some of this, we do, I think, need to have something that is a little bit more third party. Maybe that's the best way to say it. We need a bit of a third party lens on whether or not this is effective.
Got it. Okay. Maybe to administration, like I think you have tools to hold main or principal contractors accountable and the reporting. So does this motion allow you to bring back something that will say, these are the tools, these are the limitations, these are legal hindrances that are in our way of getting that information? Will this allow you to do that and bring back something that we can look at how to evaluate?
I think, well, our reporting and measurement framework is trying to do that. The aim and the goal of that program is to provide reporting on how the social procurement program is working. So if bringing that to the council is helpful, we can bring that work, but it's going to be, again, mostly focused on our contractual relationships with the prime or with our contracting parties. If we want to think about their relationships with their subs, although we can hold them accountable, but if that's where the council would like us to explore, maybe it needs to be a bit more specific, that we explore that part of relationship and see how we can explore. In terms of third-party verification, though, I just wanted to quickly mention, in 2022, we explored that option. We talked with a few third-party verification companies. The cost was high, and that's why we decided to see how we can do the work in-house. Like, back in the time, we were thinking, what we heard was like 200 to 300,000 a year sort of cost to get a third-party person to provide that services.
On an annual
We can
basis?
budget for it and procure it through a competitive process if that's the desire. We can look at it as one of the options.
So that $300,000 was on an annual cost to hire somebody to do the evaluation
200 to
whether,
3, yeah.
wow, that's a lot of money.
Yeah, that's what we got from industry. They were options that they were not as expensive, but we felt maybe we should consider doing that work in-house with our resources. But it's a lot of work and resourcing is a challenge, but we can look at that option and bring some numbers back if that's what the council is preferring us to do.
So on the work that is underway, which work is that? Can you elaborate that again?
The reporting and measurement framework.
Okay.
I think Mrs. Smith can maybe explain.
Oh, so that's the target date of fall 2024?
Yes, that's
Okay,
going to
I
be
see.
enrolled, and what we are envisioning in there to say, okay, the program has started, let's track how many procurements is going, but we are already tracking that, but a more in-depth look at what is being included from the menu, how contractors are responding, and looking at the dollar value spent and that kind of information to track the success.
And the issues that Councillor Hamilton and Councillor Paquette and I am raising as well are on the subcontractors, right? So you want to be more specific when you come back in fall. Can you bring that work along with that report on how do you evaluate subcontractors?
We can look into that, the options, and bring that to the council.
And you need more clarity in the motion to do
I
that,
think
right?
so.
Okay.
Either that, or I guess like what I'm reading into this motion is that you want it not on existing contracts with prime contractors, but you want it extended to include the use of sub-trades in existing contracts.
Yeah, that's where the issue is, right, Councillor Hamilton? That's where you want to get at, right?
Yes, yeah, and I just drafted this on the fly, so I'm open to amendments to clarify that we'd like to see some analysis of the subcontractor relationship.
So, maybe I'll go, if you think about that, Councillor Hamilton, how you can amend this, right? And I'll go to Councillor Wright in the meantime.
Thank you. And then what would we do with that information? Would we be able to cancel contracts that they would be infringement, like our contractor?
Well, depending on what we see in those data, we have options. If there is an offense or violation of their contractual obligations, there are options to explore within the contracts, whether the prime is at default or not. But I'm not I believe our options are limited, as Sarah Hughes, our legal counselor on the call, mentioned, but I'm curious to see if she has something to add.
Yeah, there's actually one thing that I neglected to add earlier is that it is a default of the contractual obligations of the contractor if they fail to comply with the commitments they've made in the sustainable procurement requirements of the contract. And that default, we would give them an opportunity to correct the default within a certain amount of time. And if they fail to correct the default, we would have the option to terminate the contract with the contractor.
Okay, and then there could be costs related to that, but then this would maybe, would signal, I guess, to the community that we're serious about this? Even if we didn't cancel, the first contract, but just that we are looking at it, and so then the subcontractors might think twice, maybe. Okay, I would be receptive to having some more information.
Thank you. Councillor Hamilton?
I might suggest, I can amend my own motion, but I might suggest an amendment.
We're a committee, right? We're a committee,
Yeah.
so if you want to suggest
So-
something, that's fine.
So social procurement policy within contracts that contain or that involve subcontractors. So where relevant, and give, and so I think that contextualizes it.
So how
So it
would
would
we,
read-
how would maybe, if we say, Councillor Hamilton said, that administration provide a report on metrics to evaluate subcontractors in the regarding city's social procurement policy, or within social. Can we just add the word
Yeah.
evaluate subcontractors? Word contractor
Yes.
after evaluate.
Yeah, that's friendly.
Yeah. Would that help, Swap? Okay. So if you could add the word subcontractors in after word evaluate. So then your focus is more on subcontractors as you do this. And you can bring this when you come back in fall of 2024, right? Or what is part, are you coming back in fall 2024?
We are not planning to, but we can provide the update.
Yeah, provide an
follow up with
update.
the report.
Okay,
Yeah.
got it. Okay.
Sorry, Mr. Mayor, just quickly though, we will do this work and it's going to be focused on social procurements, but some of the concerns I'm hearing may not exactly be is the way that the social procurement menu and the document works. Like if there are matters of offense or them not following the legal obligations, again, we can work with our legal support team and look into those options too. But when it comes down to social requirements, is basically what we would like them to do in support of the program in terms of hiring Indigenous, hiring social enterprises, like gearing their spend towards social benefits and social values. And that's how the program works. But if the concerns, again, is more about maybe they're doing something they are not supposed to legally or based on their contractual obligations that may not exactly fall on that they doesn't fall under the social program. It could be like other issues that is concerning the councillors and not necessarily like the social procurement work that we are looking at it within this program. But we can explore those options too, but it may depart or get a little bit outside the scope of the sustainable procurement program and those 4 pillars. But we can, we'll take it back and work on it. Just wanted to say the definition of sustainable procurement has its own definition and some of the concerns may be outside that scope.
Okay, good. On the coming back, Councillor Hamilton, fall 2024, you report annually on this, right? Can this come as part of the annual report, Councillor Hamilton, or you wanted this before that?
I think it would be helpful to get an interim update on this. And I take Mr. Sarabi's point that some of this is regulatory, and I think I've committed at least to, and I think Councillor Paquette as well, that ship has sailed. My focus with this is how are we making sure that we're closing that gap going forward.
Okay, good. Okay, we have a motion on the floor now. Okay. Anyone to speak? Councillor Paquette?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just want to thank yourself for your excellent questions today, and I'd like to thank Councillor Hamilton for this motion. You know, I understand that sometimes to implement our policy and follow the spirit of the policy, there might be a minimal or nominal charge, you know, to ensuring that that's done right. However, to protect the reputation of our city, to ensure that public dollars are being used in a way that is in keeping with how the public expects those dollars to be spent and utilized, and ensure the protection of workers. I think that you know, looking into options like that probably makes a lot of sense, because the cost of not doing those things can mount. And if I am starting to hear about some of these issues, and other councillors are starting to hear about these issues, it will not be long before this becomes a public conversation. And if we are not ahead of that, if we are not proactive on that, if we're not doing everything we can to mitigate the potential damages, then we are culpable for that. And so this motion is getting ahead of that. It is it's exactly what we need, and it shows some foresight and some leadership. So again, thank you to Councillor Hamilton. I hope this gets support. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Paquette. Councillor Hamilton to close.
I don't have anything more to add. Just thank you for indulging this conversation today. And I agree with Councillor Paquette. There's some, I think, reactive things that are fueling both our frustrations. But I think the purpose of this going forward is to make sure that our procurement, that we are sort of living our values as we move forward. And I believe everybody, including the folks from administration presenting today, also want that. So I'm happy to share some of our learnings offline and see what we can do to improve the process going forward. Thanks.
Thank you. So please vote.
We have all the votes.
Display the votes, please. That is carried. Okay. Thank you. Thank you so much. Yeah. Next, we go to our next item is 2023 Investment Committee Annual Report.
So good afternoon. We do have a presentation if you'd like us.
Go ahead, please.
So the Investment Committee Annual Report provides a summary of the results of the city's various investment funds for 2023, as well as outlines the key projects that were completed during the year. Next slide, please. The city's investment program invests monetary assets of the city and trust assets under the administration of the city. The assets are comprised of the Edtel Endowment Fund, the city's pension fund, the long-term disability fund, and reserves and working capital. While the majority of these underlying assets are held for a specified purpose, the city's investment program helps diversify the revenue base and supports Edmonton's financial sustainability. The earnings of the city's investment funds are used to fund capital on a pay-as-you-go basis. This allows the city to manage the risk associated with the volatility in earnings, while allowing these earnings to be contributed back to support various capital projects. Over the past 10 years, these earnings have been equivalent to the city increasing property taxes by about 6%. The Edtel Investment Fund is the city's largest investment fund. Since its inception of 1995, a total of $1 billion in dividends has been paid back to the city. This is in addition to the growth of the fund's principal from $465 million to $938 million. Over the last 10 years, $512 million of earnings from the city's other funds have been contributed back to the city's budget. I'll now pass it over to Sandy McPherson, who manages the city's investment team.
Great, thanks, Stacy. Okay, yeah, you're on it. The city's investments are governed by the MGA and its municipal investment regulation. City Council approves the investment policy. The investment committee terms of reference, which is approved by the city manager, outlines the roles and responsibilities of the various entities involved in managing the city's financial assets. The investment committee is comprised of 2 internal and 5 external members who are appointed to bring both investment and business expertise to the city's funds. The city's investment management team manages the investment portfolio. Certain aspects of the portfolio are managed in-house, while others are managed through external investment managers. Each investment manager has an agreement and mandate that covers their investment guidelines. The investment policy requires an annual report back to City Council measuring performance against the policy's various objectives, hence why we're here today. Oh, you're already there. You're quick. So in terms of assets under management, overall the city manages $3.3 billion in a variety of different funds. The funds are comprised of both city assets as well as third-party assets, such as the pension and long-term disability funds. The largest fund is the EdTel Endowment Fund at $938 million as of the end of last year, and the smallest is the Long-Term Disability Fund at $163 million. Of this $3.3 billion, 1.6 of the city's investment structure is managed by external managers in multiple asset classes, as described in this slide. The assets of the EdTel Endowment, Pension, Balanced, and LTD funds are pooled together to achieve economies of scale and therefore reduce fees. Asset classes and asset mix is determined by assessing investment objectives, risk tolerance, and time horizon. The various underlying fund managers utilize different investment strategies depending on the mandate. In addition, $1.7 billion is managed internally by the city's investment staff. These assets are invested in money market and fixed income securities. The fee savings from managing a portion of the city's financial assets in-house are approximately $1.5 million per year, or to put it another way, over the last 10 years, we've actually saved $15 million. In terms of 2023 investment highlights, performance of the city's funds ranged from 5% for the money market fund to 11.1% for the EdTel Endowment Fund, reflecting each fund's asset mix. In other words, the amount of bonds versus equities or other asset classes that the various funds are invested in. On a 4-year basis, returns have been strong, and over a long-term 10-year basis, all of the funds have continued to outperform their benchmarks. The city's largest fund, the EdTel Endowment Fund, paid $45 million in dividends to the city in 2023. In terms of key projects completed in 2023, an external third party conducted a comprehensive review of the EdTel Endowment Fund, the Pension Fund, and the Long-Term Disability Fund. The results confirm that each fund continues to have an appropriate asset mix in relation to its objectives, time horizon, and risk tolerance. In addition, the asset allocation policy of the EdTel Endowment Fund supports the current 5% spending rate and ongoing dividend payout from the fund. Over and above that, previously, a review of the city's fixed income investment structure was undertaken to identify where potential enhancements could be made. This analysis supported the addition of a new private debt investment mandate, which was implemented in 2023 and is expected to provide additional yield and diversification improvements beginning in 2024. In terms of environmental, social, and governance considerations with respect to the city's investments, all of the city's investment managers incorporate ESG into their investment decision-making when selecting companies to invest in on behalf of the City of Edmonton. In addition, all of the managers are signatories of the UN Principles of Responsible Investment, which provide a industry-wide standard against which the manager can continue to assess itself and strive for best-in-class due diligence, investment monitoring, and reporting. Furthermore, the city's investment policy contains a commitment for the City of Edmonton to support social and ethical business practices by voting on corporate policies of the companies in which the city owns shares. In 2023, the City of Edmonton continued to exercise its shareholder rights and vote its proxies in accordance with the investment policy. This concludes our presentation. We'd be happy to answer any questions the committee may have.
Okay. Well, thank you so much for the presentation. Now we will open up for questions from committee members and council members. I know I exempted this. Maybe I'll start, right? And very impressive how the EDTEL Endowment Fund has grown from $465 million to $938 million, and that's driven by policy of maintaining the initial investments and making sure it's not being eroded by inflation, right? So, but one thing that I noticed is that even though dividend has fluctuated over numerous times, but overall it's kind of around that $38 million, right? So I just want to understand is the relationship between the overall amount growing but dividend not growing. Can you explain? Just kind of stood out to me. Can you explain that to me? Like why dividend overall is not growing from the EDTEL Endowment Fund? Or is it growing that I'm reading it wrong?
So the design of this policy, I believe, is based on a similar thing with the Yale Endowment Fund.
Yep.
So over time, what you see is we establish the dividend at a rate that won't erode it, but we also don't want to be in a position where we can't pay a dividend each year. So maybe just throw it over to Mr. McPherson to provide you with a little bit more detail of how that's established.
Yeah, thanks, Stacy. So, so if you look at the chart on page 13 of the report, you'll see that it went from 41 million in 2001 to 0 2002. So after that happened, we, as Stacy alluded to, we patterned our EDTEL dividend payout to be similar to the Yale Endowment Fund, where we're trying to establish a stable, sustainable dividend that grows with inflation, but also protecting the integrity of the fund. So depending on any given year, there can be circumstances where the dividend will go down or up, and then we have corridors around that, and I know it sounds complicated, but we want to make sure that ultimately the fund is sustainable and it provides what's called intergenerational equity between not only current Edmontonians but future Edmontonians.
Maybe I'll just add that we also, when the inflation adjusted principal is greater than 115%, we pay a special dividend.
Okay.
And so we keep the base dividend, we seek stability in the annual dividend, and we use the special to deal with when the principal grows to greater than what we anticipated.
So dividend is kind of fixed in a way that it doesn't fluctuate with the return, right? Like it's not.
That's
like
correct. We want the dividend
to
be, we want it to be set at a rate that is stable so that we don't have to pay it one year and not pay it in another year.
Got it. But if there's excess earnings, then a special dividend is paid out.
Not on excess earnings, but when the inflation adjusted principal reaches a trigger point,
Oh, I see.
then we pay a special dividend.
Okay, so that's a one time. Okay, yeah. Okay, that explains me there was also another question I had on the evaluation of appointing a new investment committee to look at global investments. Can you speak to that?
So, Mayor Sohi, are you talking about a new investment committee member?
The global equity manager.
Oh, okay.
project.
So, yeah, so that's on the work plan for this year.
Okay,
And we're looking at hiring a new investment firm to manage global equities on the city's behalf.
so do we have a firm now? We just want to change to another firm, or?
Yeah, what happened is the firm actually decided to close their global equity strategy that we were previously invested in.
Okay.
So that triggered us to go out and look for a new firm.
Oh, I see. Okay, got it. Okay. And they help you manage the global equity, the global investment part of the EDL, or the overall investment.
Exactly. Like actually, when it comes down to it, they manage global equities, but it's on behalf of the EDTEL pension LTD fund and our balanced fund because we
I
pool
see.
assets to try to reduce fees.
Got it. Okay, good. All right, Councilor Salvador?
Oh, yeah, thank you. Yeah, maybe just to ask about the member recruitment for the investment committee. I was just curious how members are recruited for that, and for some appointments, is that based on stakeholder groups? I'm thinking EFFU, for example. It sounds like there's a spot to fill there.
So I would say we typically have a member like EFFU because of the management of the underlying management of the investments associated with the pension. Each time we recruit a member of the investment committee, we have a skills matrix that we look at to determine to identify what skill is necessary to round out the collective skills of the committee in order to be able to meet the investment mandate.
Great, that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, and I was going to say, Councillor Salvador, as per the IC Investment Committee terms of reference that's approved by the city manager, members can only serve 3 to 5 year, 3-year terms, but not more than 2 consecutive 3-year terms. So it provides, to a certain extent, ongoing rebirth and ongoing knowledge and so on and so forth, if that makes sense to you.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Thank you so much for answering that. I think this might be a little bit of a stretch question, but I'm going to ask it anyways. So other cities are starting to issue bonds, and just wondering if you can provide some reflections on what you're seeing in other cities and jurisdictions, and maybe under what conditions we might consider doing the same.
Yeah, so bonds are a debt instrument for us, although we invest in other people's bonds. So we are looking at whether it makes sense for the city of Edmonton to issue bonds. That will take some time for us to be able to do that work. I would say, until recently, the borrowing environment with the province, previously with ACFA and now with Treasury Board and Finance, has been such that it has been very easy for us to apply for and receive the ability to borrow at very, very favorable rates, at fixed rates for a very long term.
Yeah, absolutely. And I guess knowing that there's been some changes in that space, I think that's where I have questions and might see some opportunities. Looking at what Calgary's doing, for example, I know they're potentially going to be achieving some savings there.
Yeah, I think it's just important, like when we're looking at it too, we might be able to achieve some savings on 10-year debt, but if we're borrowing for LRT for 30 years, we also are trying to consider what is the interest rate risk of moving to shorter term instruments.
Great, yeah, that makes sense. No further questions, thank you.
Councillor Rice?
Thank you, Mayor Sohi, and thank you for the presentation and lots of good information there. My question is about the investment return. So how we measure the success and for the investments the city is doing? And can you provide a little bit more information on that piece?
Sorry, so Councillor Rice, you're asking a question about how we compare versus our benchmarks?
No, and how we measure the success for our investment.
Yeah, okay. So council sets through their investment policy, which is approved by council, all the various benchmarks that we're measured against, and what happens is then we roll up all those benchmarks depending on how we're invested, to understand whether or not we did better than the general market or did worse than the general market. And so that's where you see those differences, where the fund returns over the last 4 years, 10 years, have outperformed all the various investment policy benchmarks.
So overall, and for our city's investment return, we are higher than average market.
I would say we are higher than the established benchmarks for each of the fund in general.
But when was benchmark established?
So the last benchmarks would have been established when we had council approve our last investment policy, which was 2019.
2019, almost like 5 years.
Yeah.
5 years ago.
But those benchmarks don't really necessarily change. It's just the weighting to a certain extent.
Okay. So then my related question is, and for the investment returns, how those contribute to our city's financial situation? For example, how those returns from investment contribute to our city's operating budget or capital budget?
So earnings from investments are used to fund capital that lets us benefit as a city from the investment earnings without experiencing the volatility on the operating side of the budget.
So what's the percentage in the investment earning and really contribute to our city's capital budget?
Sorry, the percentage of investment earnings as a total percentage of the city's capital budget?
Yeah.
I don't have that percentage off the top of my head. I'm not sure if Mr. Rye is online, but we have, like, it gets contributed to pay-as-you-go, and then it's used to fund pay-as-you-go. I would say it's a helpful part of our capital budget, but it is, as a percentage, it is not a significant part of the capital budget when you consider that the sheer magnitude of the capital budget.
Okay, that's actually the good. At least we have something better than nothing. So I recall we just passed the motion during budget discussion to look at the pay-as-you-go account and for the financial breakdown. So is that piece, when that reports information request come back, can reflect this investment earnings in that pay-as-you-go as well?
Yeah, investment earnings is always reflected as part of the corporate funding pool and pay-as-you-go. So each time we report it, we show you what the investment earnings are and what the change in investment earnings are.
Okay, so that's also reflect in the cash flow to demonstrate how to help our city's financial as well, right?
Yeah, the like investment earnings ultimately come to us in the form of cash.
Okay, so that is reflected in the quarterly updates as well, and we can see how our city's investment is doing, right?
So we report quarterly. It's included in the capital report when we show you the composition of the corporate funding pool.
Okay, thank you. My time is out, and back to you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Just quickly, a few questions. So the dividend policy is set by council, right? On Atel fund? Is it council-driven policy or is it an investment committee recommended policy?
It's established in the bylaw.
It's established in the bylaw, so it's okay. would the investment committee that advises on the investments, right? How much, like, would they have an opinion on a dividend? Is it appropriate? Is it right amount? It needs to go up, go down. Like, how do you balance that? Like, for example, APCO does that analysis, right? So how do you do that analysis, whether to increase the dividend or not to increase the dividend?
Yeah, so Mayor Sohi, we do that analysis every 3 to 5 years.
Okay.
Within the investment policy. Last one was done last year.
Aye.
And what it did is it confirmed the current dividend policy for the EdTel Endowment Fund.
Oh, I see. So last year done, right?
Yeah.
So you'll do that in a few more years.
Yeah,
then.
exactly.
Okay, got it. That's all I need. Thank you so much. Councilor Salvador?
Yeah, I just wanted to, I guess, confirm some numbers because I just think this is a success story that we don't get to talk a lot about. But I was looking at the 2019 Investment Committee report, and I think it's between January 2020 and December 31st, 2023. Is it right that EdTel grew by over 75 million? Is that correct?
Well, I don't know actually the numbers going back to 2019, but if that's the case, then yes, it is.
Okay. And I guess I'll just share those numbers then. And Balanced Fund grew by 125 million. Does that sound about right?
Well, as an example, just hang on for 2 seconds. If you look at the last 4 years, our, EdTel Endowment Fund is up 8% over the last 4 years, pension fund 8% over the last 4 years, balanced fund over 4%, long-term disability plan over 6%. So yes.
That's excellent. That's excellent. Okay, I'll speak briefly when the time's right.
That's it. That concludes all the questions. You want to move, Councilor Salvador?
Oh, sure.
Yeah.
Happy to move. Hang on here. That the May 3rd, 2024 Financial and Corporate Services Report, FCS 02347, be received for information.
Okay. Thank you. So we have motion on the floor. Anyone to speak? See none. Anyone? Oh, sorry. To close, Councilor Salvador.
Yeah, I'll
Oh, point of order. I had my name on to speak.
Oh, you did. Sorry, Councilor Jans, go ahead, please.
Sure. Yeah. Just very quickly, I think excellent work as far as investments go. I think Councillor Salvador is absolutely right. There's a lot of good news story here. But just I can't help but feel right now in the broader context of our budget environment that there's a little bit of sadness here for me that this endowment does come from what was a public service, EdTel, that was providing service to Edmontonians. And I'm sitting here looking down the barrel of a plus $100 internet bill in my house and plus 100 phone bill for me and then plus 100 phone bill for my spouse and dreading the time when my 2 boys are going to need phones too. And I just can't help but wonder of were we penny wise but pound foolish as a society in terms of privatizing our telecoms in the 90s. And yes, we can't do anything about this now. And yes, the ship has sailed. But it's just a reminder that, there's a core function of why we pay our taxes is to build city services that we all benefit from. And we all save money. We all have a more affordable life and more affordable necessities and more affordable basics when we're able to pool our resources and work together. So as far as this task is concerned, great work to administration. You're absolutely doing a fine job of managing the investments. So kudos, and I will support the report. But damn, let this be a lesson to our children about what happens when we look at core services and hand them over to the hands of greed. Thank you.
Thank you. Now to close.
Yeah, thank you. Just wanted to take a moment to thank administration and the investment committee for their careful stewardship and management. Our excellent performance is thanks to your dedication and oversight. And it's always unfortunate that reports like this one on our investments or reports like our consolidated financial statements, they usually just kind of pass by and slip under the radar. But it is a good news story, and I do want to acknowledge the team who's been putting in the work to keep us moving forward. So thank you. It's really, really appreciated.
Thank you. Please vote.
We have all the votes.
Display the votes, please. That is carried. Okay. Responses to consular inquiries, none. Private reports, we did not select. Motions pending, none. Notes of motions or motions without customary notice? Let me check. Seeing none, we are adjourned. 3:19.